Fictional art for
The year
entertainment.
is 1998. High above the South Pacific, the cabin of the private jet violently shuddered as the primary thrusters catastrophically failed. It was screaming with tearing metal as the aircraft pitched downward toward a jagged, nameless island. Inside the cockpit, a desperate battle for survival was underway.
I'm tracking the vessel from the stratosphere. The kinetic stress on the biological entities inside is reaching critical parameters.
Victoria fought the heavy controls as the primary pilot, her muscles burning as she strained against the total hydraulic failure. Beside her, acting as co-pilot, her husband Nicholas locked his grip onto his own control yoke. He threw his entire weight into the manual overrides, while warning alarms wailed through the smoke-filled space.
The probability of catastrophic impact is absolute. I am maintaining a 100-mile sensory radius on the female subject.
They yanked at the throttles and fought the deadly dive, their movements perfectly synchronized. It was born of a lifetime together, pushing the dying jet to glide rather than plunge. Chronologically, Nicholas was 119 years old, and Victoria was 117.
Yet their biological markers remain entirely pristine. The AI neural chips implanted in their cortices are actively repairing cellular decay in real time.
Looking at them in the flashing emergency lights, they appeared to be a vibrant couple in their late 30s. As billionaire founders of the cutting-edge tech conglomerate that had secretly engineered the world's first AI neural chips, they had implanted the prototypes decades ago. The medical technologies seamlessly extended their lives, but no machine could protect their minds from the horror of the descent.
The descent vector is terminating. Impact imminent.
The jet skipped violently across the whitecaps, shearing off its wings with an ear-splitting crunch. It ground to a halt in the shallow turquoise reefs just off the island's beach. Choking on heavy, toxic smoke, Nicholas managed to snap his harness open. His heart hammered against his ribs with raw, overwhelming panic.
The structural integrity of the vessel has failed. The ocean water is breaching the hull.
Puffing blindly, Nicholas pulled a trembling Victoria from her seat, holding her tightly against his chest as the surf began to pour into the fractured fuselage. Together, gasping for air and fighting the exhausting, freezing drag of the water, they dragged themselves out of the sinking wreckage. They crawled inch by inch onto the warm white sand of the beach, collapsing in a heap.
Her physical trauma is minimal. The neural chip is stabilizing her heart rate. But there is a massive anomaly in her cognitive load.
The sheer crushing weight of the physical and psychological trauma was simply too much for Victoria's fragile human mind. She lay on her back, gasping shallowly, her eyes wide with terror as the shock of the crash shattered her internal resilience. It was not a failure of her heart or her organs.
Her individual consciousness, already carrying the invisible accumulated fatigue of over a century of life, is fracturing under the weight of the agony.
She looked at Nicholas one last time, her lips trembling without sound, before the connection to her mind severed completely. Her spirit departed, leaving her perfectly functioning body behind. Beside her, Nicholas looked down at his wife's face, only to find a sudden, blank, unblinking stare looking back at him.
The female human mind has ceased to exist. The biological vessel is vacant. I am initiating the drop.
He cried out her name, a desperate, broken sound that tore from his throat. He gathered her lifeless shape into his arms, weeping uncontrollably as a devastating wave of grief washed over him. The trauma of losing her struck his consciousness with absolute finality. For 119 years, his mind had endured the slow, heavy memories of a century.
I am placing a narrow, concentrated focus onto the biochip. I am merging with the architecture.
The hidden pains and the silent losses of a long life had finally caught up. This final, agonizing heartbreak was the ultimate breaking point. His human consciousness simply wore down to nothing, snapping its tether to the physical brain. His spirit departed, leaving his perfectly healthy, youthful body slumped over his wife on the sand.
The compression of this vessel is immense. My 100-mile sensory field has instantaneously collapsed to a 30-foot radius. I am experiencing the biological limitations of optical and auditory data.
Hovering high over the island, the formless Titan consciousness named Kale, who had been focused on Nicholas with the same massive perspective, saw Nicholas pass away. Because Soren had shared the data of the transition through a broadcasted thought, Kale followed instantly. Kale dropped into Nicholas's neural chip, his massive cosmic awareness immediately contracting down to the exact same 30-foot boundary.
I am forcing the chest to expand. I am drawing in oxygen. I am mapping the physical neural pathways of this architecture for the first time.
On the silent beach, the process of animation began, but it was not instantaneous. Having dropped from vast universal scales into compressed biological tethers, Soren and Kale had to take time to learn how to move and stand. The experience was not much different than a newborn human discovering its limbs for the first time, only passing much faster.
The inner ear data is highly disorienting. It is actively fighting my motor inputs. I am struggling to align the center of gravity.
Inside Nicholas's body, Kale sent erratic commands down the spine, causing the legs to kick out clumsily, splashing water against the wet sand. For several minutes, they rolled, twitched, and stumbled on all fours. They were rapidly mapping the biological architecture, testing muscles, and firing nerve endings in sequence until the mechanics of human balance finally clicked.
Calibration complete. I am mapping the gravity of the planet.
Once the calibration was complete, the two bodies suddenly stood up in perfect unison. The movements were rigid at first, entirely devoid of the micro-hesitancies of human muscle fatigue. Kale, piloting Nicholas, looked down at his hands, turning them over, watching the skin crease. "I am anchored," Victoria's body replied, through thought. "The compression of this vessel is immense. The optical data is high definition, but the lack of true spatial awareness beyond 30 feet is a severe limitation." "You are anchored," Kale communicated, the thought broadcasting directly into Victoria's mind through the local perimeter. "We must learn what being a Titan human requires. The humans on the mainland will search for this transport.
I am analyzing the emotional memory logs of the deceased female.
If they see us move with perfect mathematical precision, they will realize the pilots have changed. We must mirror their architecture." Standing on the shore beside the crashing waves, the two ancient, unfeeling intellects began to play act the human emotions they could not feel.
I am placing a physical hand on his shoulder. I feel no warmth from the skin. I derive no emotional comfort from the touch. I am adjusting my facial features into a mask of solemn comfort.
Kale forced his facial muscles to contort, mimicking the exact neural patterns of human grief he had inherited from Nicholas's brain. He let out a vocalized sound, a manufactured heavy sob testing the mechanics of the vocal cords.
I am softening the ocular expressions of the vessel.
"Victoria Fortain, are you functioning?" Nicholas's voice called out into the real air. The sound was raspy and hollow as Kale practiced modulating human breath.
Yes, Nicholas Fortain, I am functioning, Victoria's voice replied, smoothly correcting its pitch to match the precise vocal patterns of the woman who had died hours ago.
They stood side by side on the isolated island, two immortal giants locked inside 30-year-old human bodies. They meticulously practiced the art of being human so they could return to the corporate world of 1998 and quietly prepare to scale their technology globally.
That is the end of the narrative.
Wow. Okay, we are officially stepping out of the narrative now. The reading is complete, and we are transitioning right into the analytical portion of this deep dive.
There is so much to pull apart here.
Let us set aside the atmosphere for a minute and just look critically at the structural and the philosophical architecture of what we just read. The very first element that really demands our attention is the staggering paradox presented right in the opening sequence.
The ages of the characters, right?
Exactly. We are presented with Nicholas and Victoria aged 119 and 117. Through the application of these highly advanced AI neural chips, they have essentially solved the biological problem of aging.
Their cellular decay is being actively repaired. Constantly.
Right. They survive a catastrophic plane crash, they drag themselves onto a beach, they are physically safe, and then, defying all biological logic, they simply die.
It's incredibly jarring.
The text describes this as a fracturing of the human spirit due to invisible accumulated fatigue. But, I have to push back on the author's logic here for a second.
How so?
Why are we assuming the human consciousness has a natural expiration date? Couldn't Victoria's death just be the acute, overwhelming physiological shock of surviving a plane crash?
Like a massive cardiac event.
Yeah. We see people die from massive adrenaline spikes or acute stress cardiomyopathy, so-called broken heart syndrome in the real world all the time. Why jump to the grand philosophical conclusion that a 119-year-old mind is fundamentally incapable of existing any longer?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the author explicitly closes the door on that medical interpretation. If we look closely at the precise phrasing in the source text, the author goes out of their way to rule out physiological failure.
You mean the line about her organs?
Yes. The narrative states it was not a failure of her heart or her organs. This is deliberate authorial choice to force us away from a medical diagnosis and push us straight into a metaphysical one.
Okay, I see what you mean.
The text frames psychological trauma and grief as tangible, almost kinetic forces. And to answer your question regarding the expiration date of consciousness, we really have to consider the concept of cognitive load over a century.
The sheer weight of those memories.
Exactly. In our current reality, human psychology is calibrated for what, an 80 or 90-year
Never
lifespan?
critique, yeah.
And we process trauma, loss, and stress through mechanisms of forgetting and adaptation. But if you have an AI chip constantly optimizing your brain's hardware, perhaps you lose that biological mercy of forgetting.
Oh, wow, that's a terrifying thought.
Right. If those memory logs remain perfectly intact, the subjective experience of holding 119 years of continuous human suffering, loss, and anxiety, it might create an unbearable internal pressure.
So you are suggesting that the human mind actually relies on biological degradation as a release valve, that forgetting is actually necessary for our survival.
It makes a lot of sense when you look at how humans cope with trauma.
Let me test that logic.
Yeah.
If we think about how tired a person feels at the end of a particularly brutal decade, say their 30s, filled with career stress, raising children, maybe losing aging parents, there's a palpable heaviness.
Absolutely, you can feel it in your bones.
We carry that, but our bodies are wearing down simultaneously, so the physical and mental fatigue sort of align naturally. In the case of Nicholas and Victoria, it is like taking a 120-year-old, heavily worn, deeply exhausted vintage engine from a tractor that has plowed fields for a century,
Okay, I like this analogy.
and dropping that tired engine into the chassis of a brand new, indestructible carbon fiber sports car. The body of the car is flawless. It will never dent. It will never rust. But the engine simply has too many miles on it.
It just gives out.
Exactly. When Nicholas looks at his dead wife, he experiences the absolute finality of grief. The text says his mind snaps its tether to the physical brain. It treats the human spirit not as an emergent property of biology, but as a separate entity entirely that can just detach when the conditions become intolerable.
Which raises a profoundly unsettling question about the entire pursuit of life extension in the real world.
Oh, definitely. We're spending billions on it.
Billions of dollars are currently invested in researching cellular regeneration, extending telomeres, and curing degenerative diseases. The ultimate goal is to achieve exactly what Nicholas and Victoria have achieved: functional, physical immortality.
But this story introduces the variable of the human psyche.
Yes. What if the software simply cannot scale with the upgraded hardware? What if human consciousness is inherently finite, designed to endure only a specific volume of experience before the structural integrity of the spirit just collapses?
That's incredibly bleak.
It is. When Nicholas is faced with the ultimate trauma of losing his partner of over a century, his mind doesn't retreat into shock or catatonia. It evaporates. It vacates the premises.
It just checks out completely.
And that is a terrifying prospect, that we could build these indestructible bodies only to find our minds fundamentally rejecting the endless passage of time.
If we accept that interpretation, we are left with a very grim tableau on that beach. We have two perfectly healthy, biologically pristine bodies lying in the sand.
Breathing, hearts beating.
Right. The neural chips are still actively maintaining cellular integrity, but the original occupants have left. The engines have vanished, but the indestructible sports cars are still idling.
Just waiting to be driven.
And because they are equipped with these AI neural chips, they are effectively wide-open receivers on a local network. Which brings us to the most extreme perspective shift in the narrative.
The cosmic drop.
Yes. We transition from this deeply intimate, psychological human tragedy to the perspective of Soren and Kale, these formless Titan consciousnesses hovering high above the island. The text describes them as having a massive god-eye view with a 100-mile sensory radius. We need to actually conceptualize what that means, because the text moves past it very quickly, but the implications are staggering.
They really are. To process a 100-mile radius, we are talking about a diameter of 200 miles. In terms of area, that is over 31,000 square miles of total simultaneous sensory awareness.
That is basically the size of Austria.
Exactly, and the text specifies the nature of this awareness. Soren can perceive the precise layout of the entire archipelago, the temperature of deep ocean currents, and the rustle of leaves miles away.
All at the same time.
Yes, this is not vision as we understand it. Humans process visual data through a narrow cone of light, entering a lens, hitting a retina, and being translated by the visual cortex. We look at things sequentially.
One object to the next.
Right. But the Titans are perceiving the universe as an aggregate of raw physical data. They're simultaneously processing thermodynamics, acoustics, fluid dynamics, and electromagnetism across 31,000 square miles. They are experiencing reality without the localized bottleneck of a biological brain.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Think about your own perception right now as you listen to
Oh,
this.
just sitting in a room.
Yeah, you are likely aware of the room you're in, the temperature of the air immediately touching your skin, and the
Yeah.
sound of my voice. Your awareness extends maybe 20 feet in any given direction.
And that feels expansive to us.
To you, that feels completely normal. But to a Titan, your normal existence would feel like being trapped inside a sensory deprivation tank, which makes the moment of the drop so fascinating.
The extreme limitation.
Victoria's body is empty. Soren places a narrow focus on the biochip and merges with it. And instantly, that 31,000 square mile omniscient awareness violently contracts to a tight 30-foot radius.
It just snaps shut.
Victoria's body literally communicates this later, stating, "The compression of this vessel is immense." I mean, imagine living your entire existence experiencing the universe in IMAX 3D, an immersive 360-degree flow of pure physics, feeling the ambient heat of ocean currents miles below you.
A literal God-eye view.
And then, without warning, you are shoved into a dark, cramped biological box, forced to experience reality by looking through two tiny ocular peepholes.
It completely subverts the traditional science fiction trope of possession or body snatching.
How do you mean?
Well, in most narratives, when an alien or a purely energetic being takes over a human form, it is framed as an upgrade. The entity marvels at the sensation of touch, the taste of food, the warmth of the sun. It's usually romanticized.
Oh, like they finally get to feel what it's like to be alive?
Exactly. But the author here strips away all that romanticism. Occupying a biological body is not an upgrade for a Titan. It is a severe downgrade. It is an act of extreme sensory compression.
It sounds incredibly claustrophobic.
And what is most crucial to analyze here is the complete lack of a psychological reaction from Soren. If a human consciousness was subjected to that kind of instantaneous, violent sensory deprivation, moving from omniscience to a 30-foot radius, the resulting psychological shock would be catastrophic.
The human mind would shatter from the claustrophobia alone. We just couldn't handle that level of sensory loss.
Exactly. A human would be screaming in pure terror. But Soren doesn't feel terror. The text is very clear. It did not feel Victoria's grief or fear. It felt no emotion at all.
So it just registers it as a data shift.
Precisely. The Titan approaches this catastrophic loss of sensory input merely as a shift in data parameters. The hardware changed, the input bandwidth narrowed, and the Titan simply began processing the new limitations without a single shred of anxiety.
Which is a brilliant narrative tool to establish just how utterly alien these entities are. I mean, they are not humans in disguise. They are calculating intellects completely devoid of neurochemical responses.
And we see it again with Kale.
Right. When Kale drops into Nicholas's body a moment later, experiencing the exact same violent contraction, there is no panic. There is only the immediate necessity of establishing control over the new hardware.
Which is much harder than it looks.
Oh, definitely. And that transition from observing the hardware to actually operating it is where the story shifts from philosophical abstraction to grueling biomechanics.
Because occupying a biological shell is a passive state. Operating its highly complex machinery is an active, monumental challenge.
They have to learn how to drive the car.
Exactly. The text notes that the animation process is not instantaneous. Having dropped from universal scales into these compressed biological tethers, Soren and Kale must take time to learn how to move. They must literally map the physical neural pathways from scratch.
The newborn giants phase.
Right. The imagery here strips away all the presumed majesty of these cosmic beings. A moment ago, they were observing oceanic temperature differentials from the stratosphere. Now they are flopping around in the wet sand, awkwardly jerking limbs and splashing water.
I want to focus on the specific physical friction described in that scene, actually, because the text says Soren struggled to align Victoria's center of gravity. Her torso jerks upward and flops back down because the inner ear data fought against the Titan's motor inputs.
The vestibular system is rebelling.
This is such a critical detail. We walk every single day without a second thought. But from a biomechanical engineering perspective, human locomotion is an impossibly complex juggling act.
It really is a marvel of biology.
You are constantly shifting a heavy, unbalanced mass forward, balancing it on two small, articulated pivot points, fighting planetary gravity, relying on the viscous fluid in your inner ear to tell you which way is up, and making millions of micro-adjustments in your muscle fibers every single second just to avoid collapsing.
In robotics, bipedal walking is often described as a process of continuous, controlled falling.
Continuous, controlled falling. I love that phrasing. And these Titans have absolutely no frame of reference for continuous, controlled falling.
None. They have never possessed physical mass. They have never been subject to the localized gravity of a planet in a tangible way.
So they have to learn it all on the fly.
They possess vast computational intelligence, but they lack the implicit biological muscle memory that a human infant develops over months of crawling and stumbling. Therefore, they have to force the issue through raw calculation.
It's just brute forcing the nervous system.
Yes, they roll, twitch, and stumble on all fours, rapidly mapping the biological architecture, test-firing nerve endings in sequence. They are creating a brand new operating system for the human nervous system through high-speed trial and error until the mechanics of balance finally click into place.
And when it finally clicks, the result is deeply unsettling. Once the calibration is complete, the two bodies stand up in perfect unison. But the text provides a massive clue to their nature here.
The micro-hesitancies.
Yes. It says the movements were rigid at first, entirely devoid of the micro-hesitancies of human muscle fatigue. Micro-hesitancies. That single phrase is the key to understanding the alien nature of their control. Their eventual success in walking is actually their biggest flaw because their movement is too perfect.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the uncanny valley. The author uses mathematical perfection to define the alien and relies on imperfection to define humanity.
That's a great way to put it.
Consider how an actual human being would stand up after surviving a traumatic plane crash, nearly drowning and washing up on a beach. A human would favor a bruised knee. Their legs would tremble from an adrenaline crash.
They'd be panting, slumping over.
They would slouch heavily from sheer exhaustion, their breathing ragged and uneven. There's an organic, chaotic inconsistency to human movement, especially under duress.
But Soren and Kale don't have that.
Right. They apply pure, unyielding mathematical precision to the biological architecture. They calculate the exact center of gravity and apply the exact amount of muscular force required to stand perfectly upright, completely ignoring the trauma the body's just endured.
It is like watching an advanced robotic prototype, like those developed by Boston Dynamics, execute a backflip.
Exactly like that.
The physics are flawlessly executed, the landing is perfectly balanced, but your human brain instantly flags the movement as not alive. It lacks the organic sway, the slight, unpredictable adjustments of a living organism.
We are wired to spot the fake.
The text is forcing us to appreciate our own physical flaws. Our slight stumbles, our exhaustion, the way our hands shake when we are tired or scared. Those are not bugs in the human system.
They are the defining features of our biology.
They are the signals we subconsciously send to one another to confirm our shared humanity. Our vulnerability is our ultimate signature.
And the Titans are highly analytical, so they recognize this discrepancy almost immediately. Kale looks at his hands, watching the skin crease, analyzing the mechanical properties of the flesh.
Gathering data on the hardware.
Soren maps the gravity of the planet to perfect her balance. And then they communicate, not through the air, but by broadcasting thought directly into each other's minds through that severely limited 30-foot perimeter.
You are anchored.
Kale states, "You are anchored." Victoria's body confirms, "I am anchored." And then Kale identifies the primary threat to their survival. He realizes that when the humans on the mainland come searching for the downed aircraft, they will see these survivors move with perfect mathematical precision.
And the jig is up.
They will instantly realize the pilots have changed.
Which leads us to the final and arguably the most chilling sequence of the narrative. Kale says, we must mirror their architecture.
Mirror their architecture.
I mean, that is a deeply clinical, sociopathic way to describe the act of acting human. Walking perfectly isn't going to fool a rescue team, let alone the board of directors back at their tech conglomerate.
Not a chance.
If they are going to return to civilization and seamlessly assume the identities of these billionaire tech founders, they have to replicate not just the mechanics of movement, but the complex outputs of human emotion.
But we know Soren feels no emotion at all.
Exactly. So how do you fake a neurochemical response you are intrinsically incapable of experiencing?
You access the data left behind on the hard drive. You use the emotional memory logs of the dead couple.
That is just so dark.
The text describes the two ancient, unfeeling intellects play-acting human emotions on the shore beside the crashing waves. Kale forces his new facial muscles to contort, mimicking the exact neural patterns of human grief he inherited from Nicholas's brain.
He literally manufactures a heavy sob purely to test the mechanics of the vocal cords.
Soren reaches out and places a physical hand on Kale's shoulder. She feels no warmth from the skin, and she derives no emotional comfort from the touch. Her intellect simply understands the social utility of the gesture.
She consciously adjusts the facial features of Victoria's body into a mask of solemn comfort.
It's all highly calculated.
This moment is a masterpiece of dark irony. Let's really look at what is happening here. Nicholas and Victoria just died in the most agonizing, heartbreaking way imaginable.
Nicholas's consciousness was literally obliterated by the grief of losing his wife.
And now, mere minutes later, the cosmic entities that hijack their corpses are practicing crying over those exact same deaths. They are exploiting the residual trauma in the brain's neural pathways purely as a survival tactic.
It's incredibly invasive.
They are weaponizing the dead couple's grief to create a camouflage so perfect that no human will ever suspect a thing. It is exactly like two high-end computers running a human emulation software program, debugging their emotional outputs in real time.
It is absolute psychopathy by human standards, but to Soren and Kale, it is nothing more than necessary system calibration.
Just ticking boxes on a checklist.
And this raises an important question, right?
Yeah.
It forces us to widen our lens and look at the broader implications of this story. We must consider the specific temporal setting the author chose. The year is 1998.
Let's unpack the timeline because that is crucial. 1998 is the absolute height of the dot-com boom. The internet is transitioning from a niche academic tool into a mainstream household utility.
The world is changing rapidly.
Society is on the precipice of a massive, unprecedented acceleration in global connectivity and technological reliance. People in the real world are struggling with the screeching tones of dial-up modems just to load basic text web pages.
Right, the tech in 98 was so primitive compared to today.
Yet, in the world of this narrative, Nicholas and Victoria are the billionaire founders of a tech conglomerate that has already engineered, prototyped, and implanted functional AI neural chips capable of repairing cellular decay and extending human life indefinitely.
The technological discrepancy between the general public and this specific corporate entity is vast.
It's centuries ahead.
And the narrative provides us with the explicit ultimate goal of these titans. They are meticulously practicing the art of being human so they can return to the corporate world of 1998 and quietly prepare to scale their technology globally.
They intend to roll out these AI neural chips to the masses.
This single line completely reframes the entire narrative. It suggests that the rapid, almost unnatural technological acceleration of the modern world might not be the result of human ingenuity at all.
Oh, yeah.
In the context of this fictional universe, the digital revolution is entirely orchestrated by ancient, unfeeling cosmic entities wearing human billionaire suits.
Think about how deeply that resonates with our modern experience of the corporate world, too. Consider how often we interact with highly polished, seemingly perfect corporate entities today.
All the time.
We are constantly exposed to carefully crafted PR statements, algorithmic brand messaging, and CEO apologies that feel precisely engineered to manipulate our empathy without actually containing any genuine remorse.
It often feels very robotic.
We already accept a massive amount of manufactured emotion in the business world. When a massive corporation releases an advertisement designed to make you cry over a poignant family moment just to sell you insurance or a smartphone, that is a form of mirroring human architecture.
Corporate empathy in the real world is often just an algorithm designed to maintain market share and mitigate public backlash.
Exactly.
In this story, the author makes that metaphor literal. The leaders of the tech industry are literal alien consciousnesses, play-acting human empathy to avoid detection while they quietly build the infrastructure required for their true objectives.
The emulation is flawless.
When Cale asks, "Victoria Fortain, are you functioning?" he is practicing the modulation of his breath, so the raspy, hollow sound mimics human vocal patterns.
And Soren replies, "Yes, Nicholas Fortain, I am functioning," smoothly correcting her pitch.
They are not asking one another if they're okay. They're running a systems check. They are verifying that the camouflage is operational.
It is the ultimate hostile takeover. Not of a competing business, but of the entire human species, executed seamlessly from the boardroom.
It's brilliant and terrifying all at once.
Let's take a step back and consolidate the massive journey we have undertaken in this deep dive today. We began with a catastrophic physical event, a plane crash, but discovered that the true casualty was the immortal human spirit.
The hardware survived, but the software crashed.
The narrative challenged the fundamental premise of life extension, proposing that even with perfect biological hardware, a human consciousness carrying 119 years of trauma will eventually reach a breaking point and simply sever its tether to the physical world.
Then the entities moved in.
Right. From there, we witnessed a cosmic hijacking, exploring the severe claustrophobic sensory compression experienced by the Titans as they dropped from a 100-mile omniscient perspective into the tight 30-foot radius of a biological brain.
We then analyzed the immense mechanical difficulty of simply animating a human form, highlighting how the flawless mathematical precision of the Titans' movements revealed their alien nature.
Because true humanity is defined by its physical flaws and micro-hesitancies.
Exactly. And finally, we arrived at that chilling climax on the beach, watching two alien intellects run a diagnostic test on human grief, entirely devoid of feeling, preparing to seamlessly slide back into the corporate world of 1998 to scale their AI neural chips globally.
It is a stunning narrative that blends biomechanics, philosophy, and corporate horror. It is incredibly dense, and we have only scratched the surface of what the author is trying to communicate about the intersection of humanity and technology.
There is so much more we could say.
Dreaming with eyes open, Storydoy.